want to welcome you guys this morning to an event that's been many years in the making, at least 3, but it's been an ongoing odyssey to try to get Mr. Doyle here to speak to you guys. I know a lot of you know a great deal about him, but I want to just remind you of a couple of his amazing accomplishments. First, winning the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award for literature, being recognized by Notre Dame with the Father Robert Griffin's Award for writing, and being, I've read somewhere, but I don't remember where, the most frequently anthologized essayist in the Best American Essay series. But if you ask Mr. Doyle to tell you who he is, he would tell you that he is a dad, 3 times over, a husband, a son, a brother, a friend, and then a writer. And that's definitely the order he prioritizes things, and I hope you guys enjoy getting to know him just a little bit more.
Beth Morgan rules, yes. Oh my God, that's so loud. Is it terrifying? Oh, okay. Let me begin in the right way. My mom and dad raised me right. My father's 94, and my mother's 93. It's a May-December romance, as my father says. So they told me, say thank you first. So you don't know me from a hole in the wall, and I don't know you. And chances are good that our roads are not going to cross much in the years to come. So before I do anything else, I say thank you for your attentiveness, for your generosity to me, for your witness, for your grace. Thank you so much. It's a great gift that you give when you pay attention to each other. My lovely bride, little tiny woman, yay, hi. It's about the size of a blue heron. I got down on my knees to propose like you're supposed to, right? Like you learn at husband school. She was standing and I was kneeling, so we were eye to eye, you know. She says, lust and romance are great, but witness is the great story. To pay attention to each other is the greatest of gifts. So thank you so much for your attentiveness. Appreciate it. I'll try to make you laugh. And then I'll do my utmost to make you cry. And then, most of all, what I would really like today is to be of service to you, right? I mean, I'm not wise. I have no authority. I'm just a pleasant old man. So, but I do know a good deal about writing and editing, about the craft of storytelling, the craft of story shaping. And there is nothing more important than that. Nothing. You know, religions, countries, families, marriages. Every aspect of your life is story, 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 story. So all I want to talk about today is story, story, story. That's all. Okay? If you don't have stories, and let's cut to the chase and be blunt here. If you don't catch and share stories that matter in your life, you get nothing. You got nothing but lies and people trying to sell you stuff. And if you accept that, shame on you. Shame on you. I'm talking about your country, your state, your religion, your family, everything that you are. I mean, if I had beer enough in time, I'd go around the room and say, who are your friends? Who are your friends? Why are they friends? Because you sit and tell stories to each other and you dig each other's stories, you know? I'm totally honest about this. If you don't tell stories that matter, and they don't have to be heavy, cool stories like, you all read Dawn and Mary, right? You all have a copy of Dawn and Mary sitting in your lap. Read it later. But stories like that matter. They matter. Whether or not they're silly stories and funny stories. Silly and funny stories are great because nobody gets hurt while you're laughing, right? Nobody ever punched each other when they were giggling, you know. But you got to tell stories that matter of grace and mercy and forgiveness and endurance. And a lot of the story of life is just showing up the next day, enduring and going on and on. I'm old enough that I've seen a lot of my friends have died. You know, a lot of people I love have died. You know, a friend of mine just died. Great guy, Bernie Harrington, wonderful man. And on his deathbed, in the Irish tradition, you go in to ask for a last blessing from the Taoiseach, the chieftain. You all speak Gaelic, right? And you're all Catholic? So you go and ask for a last blessing in the Irish Catholic world, and he puts his hand on your head, the chieftain. You get a last blessing. And I said to him, after he gave me the blessing, I said, Bernie, are you scared? He goes, nah, it's a big recycling program, I feel. And I had a great life, you know, 8 kids, and I love my wife, and had great work. But when I die, 10,000 stories will go with me, and what a shame that is. Some of them were true, he said. So, story, 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 okay? So just to relax and to make you laugh. Also I learned to apologize ahead of time. I usually jingle my change, so I've learned to take my change out. My nose has been busted 3 times, twice by my brothers, once by my brother Peter with a 2x4. So I have a nasal mutter, sorry. Sometimes I use bad language. I really don't want to today, so I'm really sorry if I do. Please don't be offended. If I start, you know, cursing and telling Beth Morgan stories about her tattoo, oh my God, it was disturbing. I don't want to talk about it. And sometimes I sing, which is really disturbing. My son Liam says, Dad, when you sing, it sounds like goose farts on a muggy day. So, and sometimes I'll make you sing, which is actually kind of sweet and cool. So let's just relax. Okay, let me read you a couple pieces, and then really and truly ask questions. Can I help you? Can I help you in your writing? Can I help you in any way, shape, or form? I have no wisdom, but I know a few things, and I know those few things well. So if I can help you about writing and stories in any way, shape, or form. Also, I grew up in New York City. I was born in New York City, so I have a New York accent. And every once in a while, I start chanting stuff like Yankees stink. So if that happens, just roll with it, okay? In fact, let's start that way. Ready? Everybody all together, Yankees stink. Ready? Yankees stink! Yankees stink! Come on! Yankees stink! Yankees stink! Okay. All right, ready? Let's just start by laughing. Oh, let me tell you this story. I was visiting a fourth grade recently, and I was going on and on about miracles and how miracles are pregnant everywhere, and if you just pay attention, there's miracles pregnant in every moment. You know, that yes, grief and suffering are part of the package. I don't know why, but miracles are pregnant in every moment, really, truly. So I'm going on and on about miracles and blah, 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 and finally I finished my rant, and up goes a hand. It's always a girl. Up goes a hand, and she says, "Mr. Boyle." I was like, so much for fame. You know, "Mr. Boyle?" I said, "What?" And she goes, "Have you seen any miracles? You're going on and on about miracles. Have you seen any miracles?" You know, and kids ask you questions straight up. You got to answer it straight up. And you know how you say stuff without your tack filter? Your tack filter just falls on the ground, clang, and you say what's in your heart. It never ends well. And so I said, "Have I seen any miracles?" "Heck yes, I've seen miracles. I saw people come out of my wife. There were people living inside my wife. A woman I really, really like had people living inside her. Ugh, it was disgusting. It was like she was in an apartment building, and there were people living in there. You know, I saw a head where you should never see a head. It was really disturbing. You know, and suddenly I realized, oh no, what have I done? You know, and I look up, and every single child's looking at me like this. Oh. And the poor teacher, you know, all the blood had drained out of her face. And so, anyway, I love telling that story. Okay, let me read you this just to relax and have some fun, and we'll laugh just for a minute, okay? My lovely bride and I, when we first got to Oregon, we had, she was usually pregnant, little tiny woman, usually pregnant, and she delivered our daughter. So here we are, a little nuclear family with a husband and a wife and a daughter. Oh, it's so cute, isn't it so sweet? Wham, twin sons. Okay, so we had 3 children in diapers there for a while. I don't remember the 90s all that well. I think Clinton was president, but I'm not really sure. So, and then we got a dog, like we needed somebody else to pee on the floor. So anyway, so this was pinned up in the bathroom when my sons were little. Rules for small twin boys in the bathroom. Number 1, point it down. Number 2, keep pointing it down. Number 3, Dad does all wiping. Number 4, keep pointing it down even if you're sure you're done. Number 5, the most important rule of your whole life, boys, look at me. Each boy points his own pointer. Can I help my brother? No, you can't help your brother. Number 6, if spilling occurs, tell Dad. Number 7, no washing hands without Dad. Number 8, no washing anything without Dad. Number 9, no, you can't pee in the bathtub. Number 10, yes, you can pee in the bushes outside. This is Oregon, for heaven's sake. Number 11, no, you can't pee in the car, even if it's parked near the bushes outside. This is where the boys get into if-then statements, you know. This reminds me, one time I was having a beer with a friend of mine on our lawn. My friend looks out at our car, there's one car, and he looks out and he goes, "You know, I don't mean to pry into your personal life, but there's a small naked boy trying to mate with your car." And this was my son Liam, who ran around naked all the time when he was little, like 2, 3 years old. And he decided for some reason he was going to pee in the gas tank of the car, he told me later, you know. So I'm standing there with my friend watching this. My friend says, "Aren't you going to stop him?" And I said, "No, I kind of admire his ambition." You know. Number 12, yes, Dad has a pointer. Number 13, no, Mom does not have a pointer. Number 14, no, I don't know where Mom's pointer went. You know, et cetera, et cetera. This was pinned up on the bathroom wall for years. My sons kept tearing it down, but we kept putting it back up because it's important. That's why. Okay. This is when my children were little. Somebody said to my lovely bride, "Do you guys have a video camera? This is chaos." I mean, 3 kids in diapers and a dog. It was total chaos and hubbub in our house. And somebody said, "Do you guys have a video camera?" And my wife said, No, I have him," because I swore I was going to write down every single thing our kids ever said. Because you know how kids are so they're so blunt and naked with the way they speak. They have no grip on agenda, and they're not at all cynical and sarcastic and snotty, and they have a vague grasp of grammar and syntax, And so I tried to write down, so I did this for months, and then I finally had to give up because it's an overwhelming project. But I stumbled across this the other day. Things my kids have said that they don't know I know they said. Here's some of the things that my children have said to me in our house. I told Dad I did my homework, but the teacher didn't give us any homework today, so the joke is on Dad. Here's my daughter, age 16. My daughter at age 16 was the snottiest, most supercilious person in the history of the universe. Do tell me that you have not spoken in this tone to your father. Okay? Get that tone? Get that snotty tone? You know what I'm talking about? 16 years old, you know everything in the whole world, and your father's an idiot. You got that tone in your head? Ready? Here's my daughter. I know I said I'd be home at midnight, but I'm the one who said that. So when I decided to not be home at midnight, I was not actually late because I can change my mind. What is that? That's ridiculous. Why do we have to wear socks that match? Dad doesn't wear socks that match. He says they match, but they do not match. He doesn't even wear socks. Dad is a sock liar. This is what I want on my gravestone. I decided, Brian Doyle, sock liar. I walk into the house one time when my sons, when they were little, they had twin sons, and when they were 6, 7 years old, they hung around a little pack of other 6 and 7-year-old guys, all these little crew-cut dudes, So often I walk into my kitchen, and there'd be 6 or 7 little crew-cut guys eating, I've actually walked into my kitchen and said, who the heck are you, and why are you in my house, and, oh, hi, Mr. Doyle, And so one time I walk into the kitchen and there's a whole bunch of guys, little 6 and 7-year-olds, and my son Joe is explaining the rules of the Doyle family to his buddies. Rule number 1, wear pants. Pants are important, right? And I walk in as he's explaining this rule to his friends. If our dad dies, our mom has to marry his next younger brother. And if he dies, she has to marry Uncle Tommy because he's the last brother in the family. But if Uncle Tommy dies, our mom is an unrestricted free agent. It's like, I turned and walked right back to the bedroom thinking, did I say that to the kids? The reason the ocean is salty is because all the animals in it have been peeing in it since before there was even such a thing as time. Dad says all beings are holy in the same proportions except the New York Yankees who are the spawn of Satan. It's like, did I say this to the kids? Dad says the only reason people are not allowed to marry animals yet is because filing joint tax returns is too complicated. It's like, did I say these things to the kids? So anyway, all right. Let me read you this piece because I think it's important. Again, some stories are crucial, Like silly stories are fun. The Rules for Small Twin Boys in the Bathroom, I think is a good story. Nobody got hurt while I was reading that, and you giggled. And isn't laughter a great weapon against the dark? It seems to me more and more I'm beginning to think all the spiritual visionaries I've met and studied and read about and heard about, Jesus, I think, had a dry sense of humor personally. Nice Jewish boy. I used to teach, my pastor just retired, and I said to him, what's the single stupidest mistake you made in 50 years as a priest? The dumbest thing you did? And he goes, oh my God, having you teach Sunday school, that was a mistake. Because I used to tell the kids, okay, his name wasn't Jesus Christ and he wasn't Catholic. And the kids were like, what? Every parent would call the pastor that night. So, but the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Meher Baba, I mean, they're all liable to laughter. That's very interesting to me, People who are spiritually visionary are liable to laughter. They have small egos. They're humble. They understand that they're not heroes, right? The great murderers of history, all the people that you've studied already, I'm sure. Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, Osama bin Laden, who murdered 3 of my friends. Can you imagine any of those guys? Mao. Can you imagine any of those guys, any of those famous murderers? Can you imagine them smiling or laughing? I've never seen a photograph of any of those guys except with that smarmy, smug, arrogant look on their faces, as if they knew anything at all. What a bunch of bums. Shame on them. Laughter, laughter, laughter is actually a great thing against the darkness, it seems to me. So, anyway. But let me read you this piece. I just met this young woman, 27 years old. My lovely bride says, you can't call her a girl. And I think she's a girl to me. 27. Oh, my God. So I meet this kid at my university recently, and I tell you this story. I always read this when I do readings and talks because I want to remember. You forget we're at war. We're in not one but 2 wars, and all wars are fought by children. They're fought by kids. Nobody has more respect for people in the uniform of the United States of America than me. No one. My dad was in not one but 2 wars. My poor daddy got out of the Second World War, didn't die miraculously. that was supposed to die and didn't. And then he stayed in the Army Reserves. He says, dumbest thing I ever did, because he got a letter in 1951, greetings, welcome to the war in Korea, but you forget and I'm sure every one of your lives is touched in some way, shape, or form by somebody in uniform, right? Your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, your neighbors. There's people all over Atlanta, and they're kids. If you read the paper like I do, every day I read the paper, and I read that little box in the paper, died yesterday in Iraq and Afghanistan. You read the ages of the kids who died? 22, 25, 19. Oh, God, you forget they're kids. They're kids with weapons. There's got to be another way. There's got to be another way. Believe me, I think about this all the time. Bin Laden murdered 3 of my friends on September 11th. Tommy Crotty, Farrell Lynch, Sean Lynch. Tells you something about Irish Catholic New York, right? All the firemen and the cops that day were Irish Catholic boys, big boys. My 3 friends were the first guys in their generation to go work in the towers with white collars. They were the first guys to have suits and be brokers in the towers, right? And for a long time after September 11th, I was enraged. I was filled with vengeance. I would have killed bin Laden in a second. If I was standing next to him, I would have ripped his heart out, And then it was my daughter called me on it. Again, a child will lead us, right? And my daughter said, well, you're always telling us that violence is a failure of the imagination, Dad. You're always lecturing us that if God gives you a tool and you don't use your tool, that's a sin, Dad. And if you're not going to tell any stories fighting back against bin Laden, isn't that a sin, Dad? And in fact, isn't that 3 sins for your 3 friends who died, Dad? I was like, go to your room. But she was right. She was right. And so I tried to catch and share stories after that, and I never forgot. It was a great epiphany of my writing life. So I realized I got nothing to say to bin Laden now except, now I wouldn't kill him. I would say to him, you fool, you stupid geek. Don't you understand? I got a bigger story than your story. Your story is old and small. Your story is old and bloody. You fool. First of all, killing people to get them to believe what you believe, stupid, bad human resource management, Second of all, killing people to scare other people to believe, make them believe what you want to believe, stupid. I'm Catholic. We tried this. We called it the Crusades. We were early terrorists. It didn't work. It doesn't work. You're not going to scare people. Violence doesn't scare people. Violence makes people fight back. Stupid, stupid, stupid. You got a story? I got a bigger story than you. I got a story of the firemen who ran up that day in the towers and never came back down. And why did they run up? Because I don't have a word for that. I had a friend who was a fireman that day, and I said to him, why did those firemen run up there? Are they going to put out a fire on the 108th floor? And he goes, what are you, nuts? I said, then why did they run up? And he goes, I don't know, Brian. You're a writer. Why don't you find a word for it? Because all the words I got are weak. They're totally weak. What am I supposed to say? Duty, honor, responsibility, occupation? Those are stupid words. They're not big enough for the courage of those guys. The people who ran down and got out of the towers that morning and turned around and went back in again to help out people. God help me. How old were you on September 11th? How old were you? 2? 5? You guys were in kindergarten? Oh, geez. With those twin scars burned on your brain. Every one of you saw that on TV that day, didn't you? Did you? Were you even in kindergarten? How old were you? 5? 2? Oh, 3 years old. And you remember this at 3? Do you remember watching it on TV? Oh, Jesus, awful, awful, awful. Every day is September 12th to me. Every day after this, Did you hear the story about the football player who caught a baby? The courage of people that day makes bin Laden's story look like a freaking joke, Guy was a football player, college football player. In fact, he was from Georgia, come to think of it. And he's walking down the hall. Here comes the killer cloud. You remember the towers come down, and the killer cloud comes out, right? You got caught in that cloud. You died. That cloud was filled with flying pieces of metal, and it was going at about 300 miles an hour. You die. And this guy steps into the street, and he sees, oh, my God, what is that? And he sees this cloud coming. He goes, holy cow, and he steps back behind a brick wall, sensibly, right? And then he realizes, wait a minute, there was a lady running. He saw a lady running in the front of the cloud, clutching a baby. And she's booking it, man. She's going to save that baby or die. She's got the maternal thing. And he said, all my life I'll think, I hesitated a second. I'm ashamed of myself. And then he steps back out into the street. He goes, and he yells at the lady, throw me the baby! And the lady, she's in that maternal thing. She's going to save that kid, and she throws him the baby, and he makes the catch. He was a college football player, this guy. I heard him on the radio, and he said, oh, my God, I realized later, all those practices, all those days in the weight room, all those games, it was all for this moment. Like, he catches the baby, right, and he sees the mother go sliding by in her stomach, all the skin ripped off as she slides by. But the guy did it. He stepped out. Did you hear the story about the guy at the Pentagon? We forget the Pentagon got hit. 198 people were murdered in Washington, D.C. that day. Pennsylvania, the field in Pennsylvania, Washington, New York City, right? At the Pentagon, the guy, Sergeant Chris Brayman, another guy I heard on the radio. Sergeant Chris Brayman, he realized as soon as the plane hit, he realizes, deal with the problem. Army training, deal with the problem and then think about it later, right? Army, go, go, go. And he realizes, of course, people are going to have to jump out the windows. You forget the Pentagon is a big 4-story building, right? So he gets under the window, ready to catch people, and he says, I pulled over. I was driving and had to pull over because I was laughing and crying at the same time. He goes, I stood under the window and yelled up at these people, jump. And so he says, I caught in this order a small woman, a slight woman, a small man, and an imposing woman. and so he starts laughing, and I'm like, what? And he goes, well, I look up, and there's this woman, and she's an imposing woman in the window. And he yells up, jump! And she yells down, I am really fat! And he yells up, jump now! And so she jumps, and he goes, I saw her coming down like an eclipse. It was like an eclipse of the sun, and I braced myself, and I made the catch, but my back's been all a mess ever since. And then he starts laughing, and the woman on the radio was the imposing woman, and she starts laughing and says, that Sergeant Chris Brayman, he put his hands where no man but my husband has ever put his hands before. I'm giggling listening to this, but sobbing at the same time. It's like unbelievable, the courage of people that day, the courage, So I would say to Bin Laden, your story is old. I have stories of the fireman who ran up, the man who caught a baby, the teacher who ran out of the ash with the child on her shoulders, the couple who leaped from the South Tower holding hands, the people who escaped from the building and ran back into the building to help people. Do you not understand, you poor fool, that your story is old and stupid and it's going out of business? Let me give you a little moral charge. In your generation, violence is a failure of the imagination. We've been doing this for 1,000,000 years. We've been killing people. You kill my friend, I'll kill you. And then your friends kill my friends, and my friends kill you. On and on and on and on and on. Stupid. It's a stupid thing. And we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. And the people who are most against war, in my experience, soldiers and sailors and airmen. People who wore the uniform, those are the ones who think war is a really stupid way to solve problems. Let me quote my father, who's been in not one but 2 wars. War is stupid. Are there any other questions? His solution to international conflict is strip chess, which is really disturbing. He goes, Saddam Hussein and George Bush could have solved their problem by locking themselves in a room and having a good game of strip chess. I was like, Dad, that's disturbing. that's just a disturbing idea. I don't want to think about it. So anyway, so here I am off in Iran. I just did a reading, and a lady came to me and said, so are you Catholic? I said, yes, ma'am. We just talked for an hour about mercy and grace and forgiveness and Flannery O'Connor and blah, 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 another Georgia person. And I said, so I thought we were pretty clear about me being Catholic. I said, why? And she said, well, you have a future in the evangelical church. I was like, no, ma'am. My mother's on a walker, but she can hit you with that walker. And Anyway, the piece I wanted to read you is this one, 27-year-old girl. Recently, I met a quiet young woman who didn't say much, but what she said was dry and pithy and direct. And after a while, I asked if she could take notes as she talked, and she said, okay, and this is most of what she said. My name is Jacqueline. You can call me Jackie. Until recently, you could call me Lieutenant. I'm now retired from the service. I'll be 27 years old on Sunday at 1400 hours. I was a hematology nurse. I'm in good health considering. I drink tea. I learned to love tea in Iraq. Some days we had tea 10 times a day. We found a samovar and learned how to use it. I had to look up what samovar was, right? A tea-making machine. There was a man among us who could play that thing like a guitar. It got so he couldn't drink anything other than the tea he summoned from that samovar. It was a most remarkable tea. He vanished one day when his truck was hit by the bandits. Another man took his place. He vanished too. I took his place. After a while, I forgot everybody's names. For a while, I called people by their numbers, but after a while, I didn't call them anything. That's when I knew I had war sickness big time. I never got hit by fire, but pretty much everyone I know did. For a while, I thought it was me that as soon as I said hello to someone or shook hands or learned their names, they were doomed. So I stopped touching people and learning their names. You would think wigging out in the middle of the war would be bad, but it's just normal. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. What a line, spoken to me by an American woman. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. Probably because we don't have any words for what happens. The fact is that wars kill words, but no one talks about that. Wars kill everything except more wars. Wars never end. They just hibernate, mutate, and come back stronger somewhere else. Wars are the zombies of history. Some of what wars kill off, you see getting killed off, like kids in towns and schools and Saturdays. But some you don't, like birds. Birds don't nest in wars, you know, so pretty soon there's no birds. And where are you without birds? What kind of world is that with no birds in it? You notice things getting killed off little by little, and then after a while you stop noticing things altogether. You don't even notice yourself, you just get by. By the end, all I cared about was my boots. You want really good boots in a war? Trust me on this one, I had the best boots you could ever imagine, and I kept them clean and oiled and ready for anything. When I got out of the war, I kept wearing my boots for the longest time. I wore them with pajamas and with the bathrobe and with shorts in the summertime. It's only the last few weeks I can go anywhere without my boots. Those are really good boots. When I'm in those boots, nothing can happen to me. Trust me on this one, I keep them on a special shelf at home just in case. You want to know something real and true and honest and deep about war? I'll tell you. Boots. Good boots are the secret. Really good boots. Oh, man. Oh, no. How sad is that? You know? Oh, geez, that's awful. Anyway, I feel like I'm ranting and raving. So you guys ask me questions now. What do you say? What do you go? How can I help you in your work? All right? You want me to tell you about Miss Morgan's tattoo again? Questions? No? None? Zero? Yes, ma'am. Fire away. Howdy. Do you? Wait, here comes our runner. Wait. You want to ask me about Miss Morgan's tattoo again? It's huge. It's like, it's all, she has a Harley Davidson tattoo on her shoulders? Oh.
Hi. How close do I hold this to it? Like here or like here or like, okay. Hi.
Hi.
I am a writer, but I have the problem of ADHD with writing. So I will have a topic that I want to write about, and I'll get like 2 paragraphs in, and then I don't want to elaborate anymore. Do you ever have that problem where you feel like your idea is done, but it isn't fully fleshed out?
Oh, yeah. Then that's a poem. What happens to me, so all you write is 2-paragraph pieces?
No. I have longer pieces, but I have to like leave them alone and then come back later.
That's fine. Actually, one of the things I might suggest to younger writers, newer writers, I suppose, it has nothing to do with age, but let go. Don't think. All your training up to now has been, you know, here's how you write a poem and an essay and a short story, and you know, it's the forms, and here are the tools, alliteration and symbolism and cadence and rhythm. That's great. And then when it's like carpentry or basketball, you put in your hours and then you stop thinking about it, right? You stop thinking about it. So if you're having fun for a while, and then suddenly your fingers are running out of fun, go ahead and stop. It's okay. Start another piece, come back to it the next day, see if there's anything alive. If it's alive, you got a piece of writing. Other than that, it's just a piece of writing. You know what I mean? Like, I think about this all the time in terms of journalism. News, data, information, especially your generation. You guys are inundated by stuff, by news, data, information, what happened 2 minutes ago. That's useful, but it's not a story. A story is something else. You could read thousands and thousands and thousands of books about September 11th or about December 14th, Dawn of Mary Day, right? December 14th, Sandy Hook. There's already 1,000 books about Sandy Hook Elementary School, but I tell you one story, you remember that. So it has to be live. So if you find it running out of energy after 2 paragraphs, that's okay, that's fine. Start another piece, come back to it the next day, see if, another thing is don't force it. If like a lot of young people, it seems to me like you sit down and think, I'm going to write an essay. And you can hear the capital E on it, you know. And well, don't. Just sit down and have fun. Tell me a story, and if you find that it's a short story, then maybe it's a poem. Maybe try breaking it into pieces and see what happens. Or maybe it's a 2-paragraph piece. You know, there's flash fiction and flash nonfiction, and I mean, everything doesn't have to fit a form. You know, more and more I'm fascinated by by the formlessness of stuff, right? Content is the secret, not shape. You have to pour water into something to drink it, but it doesn't really matter what you poured it into, does it? I mean, so there's essay and poem and short story and blog rant and right? I mean, this is why God invented the web, is so people can blog. sounds like a virus, doesn't it? He had a bad case of blog, you know. So don't worry about it. I mean, if you got the urge to write and you find yourself writing, you're winning. You totally win. Don't worry about it. Don't feel bad. So, does that help? How else can I help you? Come on. Yes, ma'am. I can hear you fine. I'll tell everybody what she said. What's the first piece I ever wrote? Ever? What's the first piece I ever wrote? When I was 11 years old, I wrote a really, really, really awful short story. Oh my God, it was awful. It was terrible. Do you need to record the question? Oh, okay. You want to talk about best tattoo again? Jesus. The first thing I ever wrote, I was 11 years old, and I wrote a terrible, unbelievably awful short story. I showed it to my dad, who was a newspaper man. My father reads it, and to his eternal credit, my father is a man of wonderful grace. He reads it, and he goes, Brian, beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. And I'm thinking, the old man's losing it, you know. But he was very gently telling me, this is awful, and you didn't tell me a story. This is all beautiful lyrical sentences that don't go anywhere. It doesn't matter. The quality of the writing doesn't matter as much as the quality of the story, right? The story that you tell me matters enormously. The beauty with which you tell it is secondary. That doesn't matter. But I was entranced. I remember vividly, rather than be disappointed, I was totally knocked out because those words had never been in that order before. I still have this urge. When I finish a piece of writing, I still have this little 9-year-old boy glee. Like, oh my God, those sentences were never in that order before, ever in the whole history of the language. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's like, oh my, we take this for granted, you know? And I mean, in some ways, there's no bad writing. The only bad writing is about the writer, it seems to me. You know, my great measurement is, did you connect to the reader at all? If it's all about you, that's just catharsis. Again, that's for the web, you know. Also, this is one of my pet peeves in life is this. You know, look, this is how your boyfriend dumps you and you dump your boyfriend, okay? This is how you connect to human beings, okay? Lakers, evil. Yankees, evil. Celtics, glorious, okay? Atlanta Braves, our friends. Lakers, evil, okay? So nobody ever wrote a good novel this way yet, you know, right? So, but I that boyish glee, I never got over that, and I still had always been. Then the next thing I wrote was, I just read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Everybody read that? Letters from Hell. Right, written by the devil, right? And so I just read that, and I totally thought that was great, so I ripped it off. So I wrote a letter from hell to my mother, refusing her admission because she was too cool, and gave it to her for a Mother's Day present. Oh my God, that's the sweetest thing ever. You're my favorite son today. You know, and I was like, oh, so if you tell lies, you can get credit. And this is working for me. So my entire career has been one long lie, is what I feel. You know, I'm having huge fun writing novels which are like 300-page lies. You know, it's a great country, America. You can lie and get paid for it, as you know from your political representatives. So, you know, it's another one of my pet peeves is, why do they all have such good hair? How come there's no bald senators? Why is that? You know, one of my great dreams is someday we'll have a female senator with a mohawk. You know, that'll be a good day. So, other questions? How can I help you in your work? Yes, sir. Everybody hear the question? My favorite thing that I ever wrote? There's two of those. There used to be one of them. So, actually, grade school kids ask me this all the time. One kid asked me this bluntly the other day. If everything you ever wrote piddled away, except one thing, would you be okay with that? I'm like, yeah, because I knew what it was. An essay called Leap about the couple who jumped off the South Tower that day on September 11th, holding hands. No one knows who they were. No one knows if they were lovers, neighbors, married, colleagues, or just met each other there at the lip of hell. But a man reached for a woman, and a woman reached for a man at the edge of the abyss, at the very edge of life and death. Two hands went out. One hand reached for another person, and the other hand reached down here, and they held hands and they jumped off. You know, they would have they would have gone unconscious on the way down because it's too far to fall without breathing. And then when they hit the ground, as the Mayor Giuliani reported, there was a pink mist in the air from bodies falling that day from the towers. But I wrote that piece because after September 11th, I was so speechless. I had nothing in my mouth. I had nothing in my fingers. I was ashamed of myself. I was like, how can you call yourself a writer and not have anything to say? But I thought, I'm not adding to the ocean of witless commentary and vengeful prose I wrote. I refuse. You know, everybody was so filled with rage. And I thought, I refuse. And then I thought, I'm going to find a piece. I got to find a story underneath. There's got to be a story there for me. There's got to be a story. And I found it. I found it again and again and again. The couple who leaped off the South Tower holding hands, the fireman, you know, the teacher ran out of the ash. Oh my God, the story is of unbelievable courage that day. The guy who carried a woman in a wheelchair down 40 floors. You got to be kidding. Oh my God. This is another one of my pet peeves is sports heroes. You want to hear about a sports hero? A guy carried a lady in her wheelchair 40 floors. I don't need to hear about some damn football player. I'm hearing about this guy. There's a story. Oh my God. So that essay leaped. And then it happened to me again after December 14th, Dawn and Mary Day. Did anybody read Dawn and Mary? Do you guys have to read that already? Dawn and Mary? You do me a favor. Your homework assignment today is not to talk about best tattoos. Can we stop talking about best tattoos? Your homework assignment is you read Dawn and Mary, and then you make 10 copies of Dawn and Mary, and you give it to 10 people, and they make 10 copies of Dawn and Mary, and the whole country reads Dawn and Mary. Post it on Facebook, on the interweb, as my lovely bride says, or the Google. That's another one of her things, the Google. You know, post it, pin it, do whatever you want for it. But that story matters. So the answer to your question is Leap and Dawn and Mary. Those two essays, those are the two greatest things I ever wrote. And the reason I love them so much is because it doesn't matter at all who wrote them. It matters that somebody witnessed that story that needed to be witnessed. The story of the two, you know the story of Dawn and Mary? December 14th, 9 in the morning, Sandy Hook Elementary. There's another boring staff meetings. I'm sure you've had many boring staff meetings. And what do they hear in the hallway? Pop, pop, pop. The sound of gunfire. The sound of gunfire. I'm sure you have shooter training at Lassiter High. God help us. Every school in the country now has to have shooter training. How sad is that? You know, they hear pop, pop, pop. And the principal, Dawn Hochsprung, jumps up out of her chair, and she recognizes that sound immediately, and she jumps up and says to everybody else in the meeting, down under the table. Training. You were trained for this. You know what to do. Do the training. Get down. Under the table. Use the table as a barrier. Lock the door behind me. And she runs out into the hallway, followed to her absolute astonishment by Mary Sherback, the staff psychologist. What a shock. Who says, according to survivors, Mary Sherback said, you're not going out there without me, okay? And these two women run out into the hallway right at the kid with the rifle, okay? Again, you got a word for this? Because I don't, man. For that kind of wild courage and defiant grace. Don't you know Dawn Hochsprung and Mary Sherback in your heart? Don't you know who they are just from that story? Don't you know Dawn Hochsprung ran out into that hallway and sees the kid with the rifle, and every fiber of her body must have been saying, you want to get to those kids? You're coming through me, pal. Oh, man. You know, that kind of bony, defiant, sinewy courage, there's no word for that. There's no word for that. And I will be hornswoggled if that will be forgotten. It will not be forgotten. And if December 14th comes around and the papers and the radio stations and the TV stations are filled with, ooh, sad anniversary, carnage, horror, blah, blah, blah. And that's all? Shame, 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 shame. Because we will remember Dawn and Mary that day. We will remember them for their wild courage, for their defiant courage. You know, even the poor, stupid kid with the rifle. You know the story of Adam Lanza? High school students will know this better than anybody else. You know the story of Adam Lanza? Adam Lanza was a geek. Adam Lanza was a kid with zits. Adam Lanza didn't smell right. Adam Lanza wore stupid clothes. Nobody sat with Adam Lanza at the cafeteria table. Ever. Nobody ever sat with the kid because he was a geek. He was a goof. He was a terrible athlete. He didn't speak well. You know, he was the classic loser, and he sat by himself. If one day somebody had sat with that poor, stupid kid, One day, somebody had just sat down with him and tried to endure him for a half an hour. God help me. You know, maybe the world would have turned on a hinge and gone in a different direction, and 20 little kids would not get their heads blown off. Jack Pizzo with his little New York Giants temporary tattoo on his arm that day. You know? Story, story, story. You will remember the story of Dawn and Mary, and it has nothing to do with Brian Doyle writing it. It has to do with that kind of story will not be forgotten, you know? And this has everything to do with your country and your families and your religions. Everything that's important to you is based on story, you know? No story, no religion, you know? No story, no country. I was just in Australia and a kid said to me, yeah, you're going on and on about stories? What's the single most American story? What's the most important American story of all, Mr. Doyle? And for once I had the right answer in my mouth. For once. I was so proud. I was going to call my mom. But it's a really long phone call, you know. And for once I had the right answer. I said, you want to know? I'll tell you. 12:01 a.m., January 1, 1863, my young friend. As of that moment, no more selling people in my country. As of that moment, no more going down to the village green and sticking your fingers in some guy's mouth to see if his teeth are good enough so you can bring him home and use him like a horse. No more going down to the village green and staring at a naked girl thinking you maybe should buy her. No more going down to the village green and buying a brown baby. No more. Illegal. You go to jail. If that happens. Understand? You go to jail. And the guy who made that law got his head blown off, and I think he knew he was going to get his head blown off for it, and he damn well did it anyway. And that was, you know, I think that's the great American story. Some tall, skinny guy from Kentucky made a rule that he knew he was going to die for, and he did it anyway because it was the right thing to do. You know? I think that's the greatest American story. On dark days, I think, hey, you know, we made Abraham Lincoln, Flannery O'Connor, and Bruce Springsteen. We win, you know? So... Anyway, well, this is a long answer to a short question. Sorry. But those two essays in particular, because they're stories that needed to be caught, right? They're stories that needed to be shared. Again, if you don't share stories that matter, you're going to get nothing but sales pitches and whopping lies in life, you know? I mean, anyway, other questions. How can I help you? I feel like I'm lecturing too much. How can I help you in your work? Yes, sir.
What was the most fun story for you to write?
Well, I love writing about pee. I guess most of the stories about my children I love dearly, you know. I was just a visiting writer in a kindergarten. How fun was that? It turned out this kindergarten had read one of my novels over the course of a year, the entire year. They'd read a little piece of my novel every day, and they'd get all the way to the end, and then the author comes to visit. What a disappointment for the children. One of the kids said to me, you can't be the author of this book. I said, really, why? And he goes, you're not tall enough. I was like, what? But each kid could ask me a question, you know. Do I have it? Each kid could ask me a question, but they had to write it down. So I carried these questions with me, two of them in particular, because they're so funny. One was my man, Gatam, age 6. Dear Mr. Doyle, thank you for the story of your life, he writes after my novel. Thank you for the story of your life. I like it because you showed me you can write long sentences. Sincerely, Gatam. And the other one, I'll carry all the rest of my life. My boy Alexander, 5 years old. Stories about children, to answer the question. Stories about children. Alexander writes this down. How do you write your words? How do you write your letters so tiny to fit all those words on a page? And I totally lied to him. I said, I have a little tiny typewriter. And there's a little tiny lady inside the typewriter. And he goes, oh, really? He starts writing it down. I was like, don't write that down. Stories about children, I think, most of all. Because I'm totally knocked out by kids. They just are so fresh and clean, and they don't have any agendas. They don't have any of the disguises and masks that people put on as they get older, you know? I mean, you know, I know we'll never meet again, but I know something about you. I know what you think about. I know you think, who's going to love me, and who am I going to love? And I know that. I understand that. And yes, I know you're thinking, am I going to go to college, and what kind of job am I going to have, blah, blah, blah. But really the great question is, who's going to love me? And who am I going to love? I understand that. And yet, you know, one thing I might suggest to you from my deep age, don't put on so many masks. Don't be cool. Cool is not cool. Cool is a joke. Cool is a disguise. It's okay to be naked. It's okay to be foolish. It's okay to be open. You don't, a little tip, especially for you young men, it took me until I was probably 30 to start taking masks off. And I give you a little tip, your masks you will lose them one way or another. They'll be kicked off, or you'll take them off. The world will slam them off your face, or you will take them off yourself. Get down now if you can. Don't be cool. Don't spend your teenage years and your 20s trying to be cool. Cool is stupid. Okay? Did I make myself clear? Be naked. This is the one life you got. What will you do with your one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver says? You know, don't waste any of it hiding inside your body, your clothes, your persona. Come out. Talk. Be naked. Joke. Reach for people. Find the stupid Adam Lanzas. The same story is true of Bin Laden. You know the story of Bin Laden? 6'4", 140 pounds. A terrible athlete. People laughed at him on the soccer field. Richer than sin before he was born. What a prison. Richer than sin. A multi-millionaire before he could take his diapers off. One of 52 children, his father probably didn't know his name. His father divorced his mother before he was even in school. What a life. Can you imagine? What a twisted life. His father didn't know his name. You know, again, what if? You know, what if the kid had been a good soccer player and people didn't joke at him? What if? Anyway, well, there's a long answer to a short question. So, how else can I help you? Come on. We're together for a few minutes. Yes, sir. Just shout it out.
All right. Do you have any form of process? Like, do you take notes, then go home, sit at a computer, or how do you go about writing?
Everybody has their own thing. My habit is to be habitual about it, right? I write every day, every single day. Show up every day. I write in the morning every day. I try to write for an hour every day. My father says, you want to be a writer? Sit your butt in the chair. There's writers and there's talkers. People either talk about writing or they sit their butt in the chair. It ain't hard. You sit down and start typing, right? So if I just show up every day, my father says, you'd be surprised how deep the muck gets at the end of the year. But in my case, too, I do take notes. I pay attention all day long. I carry lots of pens and pieces of paper, and I'll just listen. You know, the best thing that ever happened to me as a writer was I learned that it wasn't about me. When I was about 30, I had a great epiphany. I realized, it's not all about me. What a bummer, because it was all about me. But it was a huge epiphany for me. I realized, oh, wait a minute, everybody else is more interesting. You know, and it was really good. It was really good for me as a man. And there's the only possible way you can be a husband is to realize you're an idiot, you know, which is then exacerbated by being a father. You want to have your humility placed upon you like a country? Be a dad. You want to lose your ego right quick? Be a dad, you know, or a mom, you know, total respect. Maybe you shouldn't be a dad. Total respect for the community, but I try to show up every day and just take notes. Often stories will come to me if I pay attention for them. I listen for people. I ask people questions. The best thing for a writer, ask people questions. Really, then what? Really? Oh my God, are you kidding? How does that work? Then what happens? What happens after that? And then what happened? And so then when you came back, then just keep asking, and people will tell you everything, especially women. You young men, I'll give you a little tip. Young women will tell you everything in the whole universe if you listen. Do not stare at her thinking, when are we going to make out? Do not do that. Do not do that. Do not stare at her as her lips are moving thinking, what should I say when she's finished talking? Do not do that. Listen to what she said and then ask her for something else to say. And then she'll fall in love with you. Any other questions? Jeez Louise. So, I ask a lot of questions. I pay attention because often people will say one thing. I'll be like, oh my goodness, you're kidding. Like little tiny things often, you know. And then the little tiny, that's the largest of the small. This is my obsession. I'm totally obsessed with how there's no small things at all. Every single day I find myself writing often about some little thing and you realize it opens it up. Like I just wrote a piece about driving to college. Sitting in the back seat at 3 in the morning, you're driving through some snowy state. You don't even know what state you're in. And just the feeling of that, right? Every moment is so stuffed with story. You know, so if I take notes and then as soon as possible I sit down and try to mill it with my fingertips, right? Just take it out for a stroll. And just like you, I sit down and take it out and see what happens and see where it's going. And don't control it. Again, stop thinking. Stop thinking with your writing. Just write. Show up every day. Keep a diary. Some people do diaries, journals, chapbooks, blogs, whatever it is. Get into the habit of expressing Your head is not your friend. Your ears are your friends and your fingertips. You want to be a writer? Listen and type like a maniac, right? Right? Again, loser, winner, loser. Okay? It's not you, it's me. Yeah. One of the great lies in life, it's not you, it's me. No, it's you. So I'm sort of maniacal about just taking notes and then jotting stuff down. Like many of the stories, like Boots, the piece I just read about the young woman, she told me that story, man. She told me that story. And I got it as fast as I could. As soon as she walked out, she was a nurse and she was going to a nursing conference. Literally, as soon as she walked away, I pulled out a dollar bill, I think, and started scribbling. The way she spoke, oh my God, the blunt, salty cadence of the way she spoke. And the story that she had to tell is like, I feel a responsibility. Somebody tells you a story like that, you get your butt in a chair, So don't let it be special. That's the other thing I would say to you. You have any interest in writing, don't let it be special. Oh, I'll major in writing. Oh, I'll go to this creative nonfiction thing in Georgia. Oh, a teacher will save me. No, you will save you. You want to be a writer? Sit down and write. No guru, no method, no teacher, as Van Morrison says. Just do it. Sit down and play and play and play and stop thinking. Just sit down and do it. Tell me a story. Don't think. Don't control it. Let go. If you find it running off in some cool direction, let it go. Don't be in control. That's one of the things I really, really would emphasize with you. And you're going to go to college and you're going to spend the next 4 years you're going to be in college and the same thing, training, shaping. That's useful. It's just like carpentry and basketball. You got to put in the hours to learn how to use the tools, right? There are tools of writing. But then as soon as you're comfortable with the tools, stop thinking about it. If you're going to sit down, if you know the ending of your piece before you start, I think you're writing just merely a piece of information. If you don't know the ending, then I think the pleasant surprise sometimes, and sometimes shock. Like I wrote a piece recently about one of my sons. One of my sons was born missing a piece of his heart and had 2 open heart surgeries before he was 2. I wrote a whole book about it out of terror, I think. I got so absorbed in detail as a place to hide, the refuge of detail. But people who read that book are always like, oh, how's your son? I'm like, he's a bonehead. Yeah, but he's a healthy bonehead, But I wrote a piece recently. I read, he's okay. He's fine. He's tall, skinny, 20-year-old who thinks that he's God's gift to women. But he's always working on his hair. I'm like, you got to come out of the bathroom sometime and stop working on your hair. But I suddenly wrote a piece thinking, well, he's okay. What if he wasn't? What if he was in a wheelchair and he was a pale boy with crises? If he died, I could sort of deal with that. I'd always have a hole where he used to be, but he didn't die, and so he's either alive and healthy or he's dead. And what if he was in between? What if he was 2 years old in his head and 20 years old in his body? And every time I looked at him, I would think who he could have been rather than who he is. What if? And I thought, would I be a good enough dad? Would I still love him? Would I be a good enough man to love him if he was really, really broken? Would I be that loving enough? And I don't know the answer to the question. And I was sobbing. I wrote this piece. But sometimes you should be shocked by yourself. Sometimes writing at its lowest level is catharsis, where you get something out. And that's the lowest level. The next level is you write a thing. Like I wrote a piece called A Sin once about grabbing my son Joey in the hallway. I grabbed him in the hallway and shook him. I was so mad at him. And he was being a total jerk. He was 10 years old at the time, and I grabbed him and shook him, and he was this flicker of fear across his face. He was terrified of me. He was scared to death of me. And I was so ashamed. I remember taking my hand off him and being like, my hand shaking, and I was like, what have I done? I didn't even hit him, and let alone the things that are inflicted upon children in our society. Oh my God. And I wrote a piece called A Sin. Committed a sin in the hallway at noon. I shook my son, and the flicker of fear across his face, that face I've loved for 10 years, haunts me this morning, and it will haunt me all my life, And people say, it was just you grabbing and yelling at your kid. It's a sin. It's a sin to scare a child. It's a sin to hurt a child. Beyond any religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about you and your heart and the spirituality and your reality. And I wrote that piece sobbing. I don't know how sins can be forgiven. I don't know how. I get the religious thing. I got that. But it has nothing to do with any kind of thing that we call God. It has to do with us. We forgive each other. We bow and bow our heads and say, please, I'm sorry. I said to my son years later, I said to him, I'm so ashamed of it. I'm really sorry. He goes, Pop, what are you talking about? I got hundreds of letters. I talked about a piece. I got hundreds of letters from fathers after that piece appeared. Hundreds. I kid you not. And every letter was the same. Every letter was, I was in that hallway too. And I'm so ashamed. I'm so sorry. You know, one guy told me he smacked his 3-year-old. Smash! Hit her right in the face. You know, she deserved it, but still, smash. And he goes, 25 years later, I got down on my knees at Thanksgiving and begged forgiveness for my 28-year-old daughter. And his daughter said to him, what are you talking about? Because the kids never remember, the father never forgets. My own father called me up, sobbing after he read that piece, sobbing, and said, I punched your brother Kevin once, and I think we never really got back on the same path, you know. Oh, and I saw my father sobbing in the telephone. Oh my God, you know. And stories matter, man. Stories matter. Stories matter. You know, as a writer, I think to myself, people, you know, there's no money in it, you know. And I started out as a writer when I was 11 years old. And when I was a teenager, I was like, whoa, hey, maybe this is one way to get the girls. You know, and now at this age and stage, I realize that I'm the luckiest writer that America ever had, because I've gotten so many letters from people saying, thank you for writing a story that I felt. I've got hundreds of letters from people who said, I felt that way too, and you put it into words, thank you. You know, oh my God, I love those letters. You know, they're so sweet. A story, you know, I think that the highest possible achievement in writing and literature, all this, we're talking about literature and books and all the stuff that you study, there's something deeper and bigger than that. It's not literature, it's not what you do in class, it's something bigger and wilder and cooler and deeper. You know, you tell a story, and a story is a place for you and the reader to stand together for a moment, shivering in that little country, where you know what you know what I'm talking about, you know what I mean, and I know what you mean, and we're standing here together. And for a moment, we're on the same page with the same electricity between us. Isn't that great? Isn't that holy? You know, as Americans, to be able to tell some stories, you know. Have we been a violent, cruel, stupid, corrupt country? Heck yes. Yes, we have. Are we still an unbelievable idea of a country? Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. You can speak what you want to in this country. You can say what you want. You can worship bundles of sticks if you want, for God's sake. You know? I was telling Beth a story this morning at our university. A kid we have Air Force and Army cadets, and this one kid had dropped out of the Air Force cadets because of conscientious objector. He said, I hate bullies, and I'll stand up to bullies the rest of my life, but I don't think shooting people is the way to go. I think shooting people in the head is a bad way to solve problems. So I think war is murder. There's got to be another way, and I'm going to find another way. And so he got up to speak one day at the Veterans Day ceremony, and all the Army cadets jump up bristling. We'll kick his butt, you know, and the leader of the Army cadets, this little sinewy woman who turns, and she turned and yelled at those boys and girls, you know, all the Army cadets, these burly Rambos, you know, and she turns and says to them, sit down! His right to speak is why people died. His right to speak is why people wear the uniform. His right to speak is why people are wearing a uniform around the world, trying to give people the right to speak and worship whoever they damn well please. Sit down! And they all sat down, so did I. I sat down so fast, I was terrified. Oh my God. But I realized she's right. You know, for all the stupid things we do in this country still, if we hold hands against the darkness, you know, and say, you should be able to say what you want. You should be able to marry whoever you damn well please. In religion, you shouldn't have to marry somebody because of a color or a religion. That's stupid. You know, you should be able to say what you want. You should be able to worship whatever you damn well please. You know, you want to worship, you know, a small black box, go for it. You know, as many children do today. So, you know. Anyway, well, here I'm ranting and raving again. Sorry. So, how else can I help you in your work? Yes, ma'am.
Have any of the people you've written about contacted you and said, hey, that story's about me, like the media?
Have they said thank
Reached
you,
out to you,
or you're an
saying,
idiot?
I was in that story.
I'm not.
Oh, have they reached out to you and said, hey, that's about me? Anything that you've written?
Yeah, my brothers all the time. My brothers constantly. My brothers are always. I have many brothers, 6. I have to count. My mother still runs through the whole family against my brother Tommy. Same as Kevin, Patrick, Tommy. My brother Tommy said the other day, 49 years old, Mom don't even know my name. And we're like, yeah, that's too bad. What is your name? I hate you guys. So. My brothers are always picking on me. That's not exactly how it happened. I'm like, well, fellas, then you write it. You know. Sometimes I get snarky letters. I get lunatic fringe letters. I have a whole box in my office that's labeled, "How dare you?" You know, because it's all the same kind of letter. How dare you say that blah, 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 blah. The best was we ran a piece about Columbus in my magazine, and Columbus, millions of people died because of Columbus's first act when he landed in what is today the Dominican Republic was murder. The first thing that happened was somebody died as soon as he set foot on the beach, So I get a lot of letters, how dare you attack Columbus, the father of our country? And I got a funny letter from a guy who said, how dare you say that Columbus had anything to do with the rediscovery of North America by white people? Didn't you know that the Virgin Mary discovered North America? I was like, woo. Who do you think was on the Santa Maria, he said. I was like, ooh, 7 pages, single space, no capital letters. Ooh, okay. So we get a lot of that kind of letter. Mostly what I get from people is thank you. Sometimes I get snarky letters saying, it's not exactly how it happened. And so my response to that is I did the best I could, and sometimes I want to deliberately riff a little. Like Beth and I were talking about that this morning. Some of my essays, I want to tell you the story, but kind of protect the person a little, Like I just wrote a piece for this magazine called The Sun in North Carolina. I just wrote a piece for them. A friend of mine told me a story, but his father beat him up every other day, for 5 years, okay? And so he told me that he had to learn how to hit his dad. He said, I realized I was the oldest son, I was the oldest child, and my dad was going to beat on somebody, and it might as well be me. So I had to learn how to hit him back in such a way to keep him at arm's length, right? He had to learn how to box his dad. How sad is that, right? He goes, I realized after a while, if I just kept him busy, he would run out of gas. His father was drunk. His father would come home roaring drunk. In fact, they would look at the clock. Again, the small that is not small. They would look at the clock. If it was 5:31, that meant that their father missed the train that he should have come home on, and he was drunk. He would come home drunk at 6:30, and he would come home ready to hit somebody. And so this guy, I said, what would you do? And he goes, well, after a while, I actually would go tape my hands, knowing, okay, you better get ready. And then he'd have to learn how to hit his dad. He goes, I'd learn how to use my arms as a defense, let him wail away on my arms. It's like, oh man, the horror of the story. But I don't want to tell everybody the guy's name, right? So I'm kind of goofing a little bit with the fact of the story. Believe me, everything that he told me is in that story. But I'm trying to leave him out of it. Like I make him a guy rather than Joe Schmo, right? You know what I mean? And you should, in your work, you can do this. Like another thing, I know there's lies and one of my pet peeves is there's fiction and nonfiction, right? There's lies and there's truth. Baloney. There's substance and there's illusion, right? James Fry, the James Fry line, the story of James Fry, a whopping lie about his memoir. It wasn't a memoir. He made it up, a total lie. Greg Mortensen just went through this, right, with 3 cups of tea. Turns out some of that is made up, But there are stories that you can tell that catch the under-truth without being factually 1,000% true. Be careful with this, but be able to play with it, I guess, is one thing I would think about a lot. So another long answer to a short question. I said to my lovely bride the other day, I feel like I'm an introvert. She goes, oh, God. Oh, are you kidding? So, anyway, other questions? How can I help? Yes, ma'am.
Your style is very pronounced and very unique, and I feel like anyone can sit down and read something by you and know within the first incredibly long run-on sentence that it's Brian Doyle.
Is there going to be a period this week?
So my question is, did you develop that style on purpose, or is that something that just came with time, or was there originally, intrinsically? How did your style come into being?
It came with time, and another thing that's a great question. I would most sincerely say to you with my deepest dad voice, do not think about style in your own work. Do not. Run away from style. If anybody comes near you into your personal space bubble and says the word style, run in the other direction, okay? Don't think about it. Just write. And it turns out, for me, I get teased about this all the time for my rolling, rollicking, serpentine, sinuous, riverine sentences, and I mean, I've gotten a lot of funny letters from people. I just got a letter from a lady who said, did you know there's a 900-word sentence in one of your books? And I wanted to write back to her saying, no, ma'am, I didn't know that, and if you're counting, you really should get a job. So You know, I just got a letter from a guy who said, "Dear Mr. Doyle, I read your work for 20 years and here are your problems." First I looked to see if that was from my mom, you know. Here are your problems. You're addicted to run-on sentences, semicolons, alliteration, and passionate overwriting. Lovely phrase. Well, you're responsible to write back to everybody, I think, morally, but sometimes you're out of your league, right? So I called my dad and said, "Pop, how do I respond to this?" "Get a pen, I'll dictate," he says. So I said, "All right," and he goes, "Dear sir, you may be right, and don't you think that passionate overwriting is the very best kind of overwriting? Cordially, Brian Doyle." So he's a mean old man. In my case, I realized I see it. I see what I do when I'm done with it. But when I finish a piece, I'm not paying any attention to style. The first thing I do when I finish a piece is I look for clarity. Am I coherent? Did I make a point? Did I tell a story? You know, is there a connection to the reader, or is this just me showing off? You know, because I love alliteration and vocabulary. I love long runs of adjectives. I have adjectivitis, it turns out. You know, but first I look for clarity, consistency. Did I tell a story? Coherence. Can you connect to the reader? I hate writing that's all about the writer and it's all elusive muck. I just reread The Wasteland. Have you all had The Wasteland inflicted upon you by T.S. Eliot? I read The Wasteland, you know, oh my God, it's supposed to be one of the great poems in the history of English literature. No, it isn't. I have no idea what he's talking about half the time. Neither did he. You know, I finally read Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake's awful. It's terrible. James Joyce had no idea what he was talking about. You know, and I think, so that's a total failure as a narrative. But I realized, to answer the style question, I realized, you know what I want most of all? I want to write like people talk. I want to write like people think. People don't talk and think in little perfect subject, verb, object sentences. They don't do that. They don't. They talk in these rollicking, rolling, oh my God, you know, and I just did a reading and a lady came up to me and said, "You know, I read your work for a long time and I always wondered why you wrote so weird, and now that I hear you speak, I know why." I was like, I don't think that was a compliment, you know. I'm waiting for the compliment. So I want to write like people think and talk, and you know what I mean. When you sit with your friends, you're like, "Remember that time we almost got arrested in Belgium?" And you know, remember that time before Beth had her tattoo, you know, and so I never think about it, and I deliberately don't. I sort of don't pay any attention when people comment on it. I just sort of nod politely and move on, you know. And I go through this when I turn my books into publishers. Most of the time I'm really lucky. I get people who understand what I'm after and leave the style alone. But sometimes I don't. Like I just turned in a novel to a publisher, and it went through a copy edit. I had to rewrite the whole book. You know, turning all the little tiny copy edits right back into the way it was before, because this copy editor just does not get it. I'm trying to write with music too. I want to write music. I want to write the cadence and rhythm and playfulness with which we speak. Why not write that way? We talk that way. We think that way. We speak American. Oh my God, what a cool language. It's this lewd, shouldery, burly, muscular, salty, silly language. We don't speak English. English literature baloney. You know, we don't speak English, we speak American. That's why Twain is our greatest writer. You know, because Twain wrote American for the first time. You all had to read Nathaniel Hawthorne. He's writing English literature, you know. All that early stuff, I find it really dull, you know, but American, woohoo, off we go, you know. And so I want to write with the playfulness of language. Language is fun. It's like a car you should drive really fast sometimes, you know. But if you're always driving 900, that's a bad idea. So anyway, run away from style. Don't think about it. Don't ever think about it. When you get to be 90, then you can turn and look back and think, wow, what was that all about? You know, so anyway, other questions, how can I help you? I feel like we're here forever. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yeah. Don't write like anybody else. God help me. I mean, my favorite writer of all is Robert Louis Stevenson. And Stevenson has a great line where he says he played the sedulous ape to all the writers he loved the best. And so he went through an apprentice period, right? He wrote like his heroes. And many American writers, certainly in my generation, did that with Jack Kerouac, right? Everybody run on the road. You guys run on the road yet? No? Kerouac kind of wrote this particular style, and a lot of American writers of my generation wrote like Kerouac. Well, wow, yeah, we'll be like Kerouac. Wrong, stupid. But it's good practice. The more you write, go ahead and copy the writers that you like for a while, but then remember, write like you talk. How do you talk to your friends? How do you talk to your friends? When you tell a story to your friends, what is the way that you tell that story? Then write like that. Write like that. Don't write like me, God help me, you know. Although I'm saving a lot of money on periods, so... You know, did you know it was a 900-word sentence? God. Anyway, there were questions in the back. Yes, ma'am.
If we were to only read one book, like ever again, what book would it be? Like just one book.
Oh my God! I think my head just exploded. Yeah, God. Can I give homework? If you've never read Life on the Mississippi by Mark Twain, oh my God, good heaven. You know, Huck Finn, by the way, is not the great American novel. Huck Finn, everybody read Huck Finn? Huck Finn, suddenly Tom Sawyer comes to save the day. No, bad, wrong. No, Twain ran out of gas, I think, there. Read Life on the Mississippi by Twain. Read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, one of the greatest natural witness attentiveness books ever written. If you're really into it, Annie Dillard is a genius. If you're really into it, read For the Time Being by Annie Dillard, the best spiritual book I've ever read. A really odd, awkward, difficult book, and stunning. It'll change your life, or you'll think it's the biggest piece of muck you ever read in your life. Life on the Mississippi by Twain. Anything by Flannery O'Connor. E.B. White, everybody forgets about E.B. White. Read the essay Once More to the Lake by E.B. White. Oh my God, that's great. That's the greatest ending ever. Oh my God, that's so great. Read Death of a Pig by E.B. White, an essay, short essay. Read Shooting an Elephant by E.B. White. The greatest piece of writing I've ever read about the trap of power, the prison that great power is, nationally and personally, is a 3 or 4 page essay by George Orwell called Shooting an Elephant. Oh God, it's great. He never mentions the word imperialism or power or anything of the sort, and he cuts right to it. One story. Again, what's the great example of this? The Holocaust. 6 million, 10 million, 20 million people murdered? 20 million people, right? Murdered for the sin of being themselves. You can't possibly tell that many stories. You can't possibly, there's there's probably hundreds of thousands of books. But if I tell you the story of a 15-year-old girl who had to hide in a closet so she wouldn't be shot for the crime of worshiping some other way of comprehending the incomprehensible. If I tell you the story of Anne Frank, you'll never forget that story, will you? You'll never forget that story. So one story is bigger than 20 million stories. How weird is that? A story is so powerful, you know? You'll never forget the story of Anne Frank. You'll never have the same feeling about the Holocaust after you read the story of Anne Frank. And you can be deluged with information forever and ever and ever, but you'll never forget that one story. I hope to God that you'll never forget the story of Dawn and Mary, all the rest of your life. Maybe it's only on December 14th every year when you pick up the paper and you realize, oh, hey, man, where's that story? I have that in my book somewhere. You know what I mean? Same thing with September 11th. Stories can be the way to, you got to sometimes steer by a story. You got nothing else, you know? Stories are compass points, lodestars, ways to live your life. They can change lives. They can save lives. I'm not kidding. They can save a life. You tell the right story at the right time, a life changes, you know? Believe you me, every one of us, if we had time enough and we were straight enough with each other, every one of us has been touched by suicide, have we not? Every one of us has had despair and darkness in our family, in our town, our clan, our tribe. Every one of us knows people with the dark snow falling on their shoulders. Every one of us knows people who are trapped in darkness and don't think there's ever going to be a way out. Every one of us has been there and knows of that kind of person. Every one of us, you know? And sometimes maybe a story is the only way to give that person a little tiny crack of light. You know, take your job seriously, for God's sake. You're smart, you're tall, you're healthy, you're here. You wouldn't be here if you weren't story junkies. You wouldn't be in this class. The reason that you're in this class and at this place in your life is because you're addicted to stories, aren't you? You know, it's not just AP to go to college. It's because you got something that you're really fascinated by with this, something about stories and storytelling. you really get off on. You think it's cool. Take it serious then, okay? Be a verb of a storyteller. Don't just let it be something that you get a freaking A in. You know, take it serious. What are the stories of your family? I love asking young people, how'd your parents meet? Do you know? How'd they meet? Does everybody know? You know, if you don't, shame on you. How did your grandparents meet? You know, I love asking people that story. I just met a girl and said, how'd your grandparents meet? She goes, I know. My grandmother was boating, and her boyfriend fell overboard, and a cop dove in to save the boyfriend, and that's how my grandparents met. And I realized, oh, she married the cop. I was like, what a great story. Oh, that's a great story. It's like the poor boyfriend, you know. Anyway, story. I feel like I'm lecturing you, so. I feel like it's been 8 hours. 5 minutes? More questions? How can I help you? Yes, ma'am.
With my writing, sometimes I struggle with, I have like an idea in my mind, but then when I write it down, I feel like others won't get it. Like it makes sense to me, but I feel like no one else will, so I guess I struggle with clarity. What suggestions would you have for that?
I guess I would, with total respect, I would completely forget about everybody else. You know, you have to, again, there's kind of the big division for me is like information, which is useful, you know, and I speak as a professional journalist. I mean, I've been a journalist for a long time, 30 some years. And so you write down stuff thinking, oh, I need to inform people of this, right? Here's a way to shape a story, you know, like where was the fire? What time was the fire? How much damage did the fire do? Who's going to be blamed for it? Who's going to have to pay for it? Well, those are information. Story is something else. And so I guess I would stop thinking about the receiver and just think, did you catch the thing that you got an itch, right? Scratch the itch and then worry about it later. Again, don't think about it ahead of time. You're thinking too far ahead a little bit, right? Like, and don't even, in a funny way, I might suggest, like, don't think about the stuff as you're writing it. Don't think, ooh, that sentence is awkward. Don't think that. Just write like hell. You know, and then when you're done, then you can look it over and shape it. Then you shape it again. The sins I look for when I'm finished with a piece of writing. A, did I tell you a story? B, did I tell too much? Another thing I've learned recently is you can leave pieces out. You can leave holes. It's okay. You don't have to connect all the dots. And especially with young writers, I see A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's okay to go A, L, Z. It's all right. The reader's not stupid. They'll fill in the holes, right? Tell me the bones. Write down the bones. I look for repetition, especially with younger writers. I see a lot of repetition. I see you'll make a point and then basically make the same point again because I think you're a little worried that you didn't make your point. So look to see, did you repeat yourself? Are you telling too much? Comment, editorializing, opinionizing, lecturing, sermon, homily, cut. Anytime you say, one of the things that editors say is anytime we see we must or we shall, that means we must and shall throw that piece away. Don't give me any advice. Just tell me a story, right? A lot of bad writing is, well, and we really should be blah, 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 blah. This is why God made the opinion page in the newspaper, and that's the only place where that should be. You know, this is why most of the sermons in your life stink. You know, because it's like, we really should do blah, blah, blah. You should do this. I'm like, you should sit down, old man. You know. So don't worry about the reader yet. Write the piece. And then does the piece have a story? Is it coherent? Did you catch your idea in any way, shape, or form? You'll always be disappointed. It's okay. It's healthy to be gently disappointed by what you wrote. I mean, I've been writing for a really, really long time, and I've written 5 or 6 pieces that I thought were just what I wanted. You know, I mean, 4 or 5 times I bet I've looked up thinking, wow, that worked. Wow. Most of the rest of the time it's like, well, that was almost okay. That's better than a stick in the eye. You know. Better than a stick in the eye is okay. You know, so stop worrying about the reader. Finish it and then think, right? I guess is my only advice. Yes, ma'am, right behind you.
Who would you have to say is the greatest influence that helped you become the writer that you are today?
Oh, my dad. My father is a great, wonderful. If I could be half the man that my father is, by the time I die, I'll die happy. You know, the quiet grace of the man, the complete lack of ego, the humility. He's a lovely writer. He's a beautiful writer. He and I did a book together, a book of essays. He was a newspaper columnist in New York City, and And our first book together was half my essays and half his best columns. And his favorite review was a newspaper in Ohio that said, "The father writes this clean, concise, clear, crystalline, limpid, lucid prose. The son, however," well, my father sent me that same damn review every 6 months for 10 years. With a circled, FYI, love Dad. He's a mean old man. But he was a wonderful teacher of writing by never trying to be. He would tell me all the time. He would read everything I wrote with he always had time. Whatever. I still to this day, when I finish a piece, I send it to my dad. I make a copy for my lovely bride, and I send the other one to my mom and dad. And my father would read anything I wrote and always say to me again and again and again, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end. "Brian, tell me a story. Tell me a story." He never once did he say, "This is beautiful, lyrical, stupid." It's beautifully written nothing. Raw something is better than beautiful nothing. And so my father, he was hugely influential to me. He was a newspaper editor also, and so I think a lot of the reason I became a writer was the sheer sensual aspect of it, the scritch of pen, the hammer of typewriter. See, you're too young to remember. See, you're too young also. But the smell of rubber cement, X-Acto knives, typing, papers, galleys, magazines, newspapers, the bird-like opening of newspapers. I love ink and the sensuality of writing. I love dearly. I always print my pieces out, and they're very shapely. Go to the library and get one of my books of poems. They're all square. I love writing boxes. I think that's left over from being a child. It's very strange. Anyway, it's deeply strange. Some kid just asked me, "Could you explain your entire writing career in one line?" I said, "Yeah, serial obsession." And the kid said to me, it was another fourth grade, and the kid said, "You're obsessed with cereal?" So, anyway, I feel like I've had you for a really long time. Can we end in the same way we began? Well, now you know me too well. Now you know me better. Sadly for you, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your witness. If you want to email me as you like. I love email. If you want to talk to me by email, send me an email. Don't call me on the phone. I hate the phone. The phone is for disasters. Email is for friends. But thank you so much for your gift to me. In your life, go with humility. Bring mercy. Bring humor. Bring your one wild and precious self to bear against the darkness. Do not accept what pompous people tell you is important. You know what's important. Love is important. Tenderness is important. Mercy is important. Mercy is more important than justice. Thank you. Thank you.